Today's lecture is going to be over Chapter 9, Section 2, Objectives. Number 1, describe the climate and vegetation of Latin America. Number 2, identify the tropical climate zones of Latin America. Number 3, identify the dry climate zones of Latin America. And number 4, identify the mid-latitude climate zones of Latin America. What we're going to be looking at today is that we're going to be looking at this region of the world right here. And as you can see, it's a very, very large region. If we kind of continue to zoom in right here, we're going to see that the climate zones are going to vary a tremendous amount, probably more than any other area that we look at in geography, just simply because we're dealing with such a very large area. So again, what we're looking at is that we're looking at a large area, different climate zones, things of that nature. Latin America's broad range of climate and vegetation is due to 3 factors. Again, it spans a great distance on either side of the equator. Big changes in elevation due to mountains. We've talked a little bit about this, but one thing that we want to look at is we want to look at a place like Mexico right here. You're going to go ahead and you're going to see a desert area, but you're also going to see places like mountains. You're also going to go down and we kind of go to places like Peru and Chile, and you can see that these areas have a high elevation, and so what that's going to do is it's going to make it so that it changes the climate. Also, you're going to go ahead and you're going to see the Atlantic and Pacific currents that kind of cools and also warms things up. So again, 3 different reasons why we see a vast change right here. We see a tropical wet climate. All right, and one of the areas that we see this in is the places near the rainforest. Dense forest with different species of trees, hot and rainy all year. It's got a unique ecosystem of a community of plants and animals. What we also see is that it's the Brazil's Amazon rainforest has got about 2 million square miles, about 2,500 different types of Amazon trees. Things like animals include anaconda, jaguar, and piranha. If we look at Brazil right here, we kind of zoom in a little bit. What we're going to see is we're going to see a very, very dark region right here. What that is that that's going to be the rainforest. And because of this area right here, because of the vast differences in, or I should say vast density in this area, what we see is that it's very hard to live in this area. We'll talk later on in a lecture about how difficult it is for people to live in this area, and so what you see is people kind of living away from that area. People don't necessarily live in the Amazon River basin because it's so hard to live in those areas. Not saying people don't do it, but it's a lot more difficult. But again, this is going to be tropical wet. We also have a tropical wet and dry. This is going to be places like Brazil, Colombia, and Argentina. If we go ahead and we look on the bottom, and I'm going to go ahead and turn my labels back on here so that you can see them. Again, we start looking at a place like Brazil right here, and then we could go ahead and we can see a place like Colombia, which is a little bit more northwest of Brazil, and then we also see Argentina, and Argentina is going to be all the way down to the south right here. So again, what we see is that you're going to see those savannas, grasslands in the tropical wet and also the dry depending on the seasons. You also have a semi-arid area. This is going to be a dry climate with some rain. It's going to be home to vast grass-covered plains or desert shrubs. Areas that we kind of see here with the semi-arid, back my map up a little bit here. We are going to have to go all the way up here and to see a place like Mexico. We go ahead and we go down here to Brazil, and you kind of see on the east coast right here. You're also going to see places like Uruguay on the bottom here, and then Argentina is kind of a good example of that right there. So again, those are going to go ahead and those are going to be your semi-arid. Now, the desert area, this is going to be places that people generally don't live. Some people do live in these areas, but what you see is that it's a little bit more difficult for that. Northern Mexico, the coast of Peru, Chile, you're going to go ahead and you're going to see these desert areas. Chile, kind of interestingly enough, has got one of the more famous, and you can see how kind of tan that is in that area. That's going to be Chile's Atacama Desert, very, very famous. You're also going to see in Argentina, you're going to see the Patagonian Desert. These areas, kind of like the notes say right here, vegetation is mostly shrubs, and these shrubs are growing in gravel and sand, and as you could guess, people don't live in those areas too much. They might live on the outer edges, but they're probably not going to live deep in those areas. You're also going to have mid-latitude climate zones. These are going to be humid subtropical. You're going to see rainy winters and hot summers, humid summers, various of vegetation kind of goes in this area. Again, what we see here with some of the countries, we've talked about Paraguay, Uruguay, Brazil. We also going to see Bolivia, northern Argentina, all humid subtropical. Mediterranean then, this is where we're going to see hot and dry summers, and we're also going to see cool and moist winters. Vegetation, you're going to see different types of drought resistant trees such as the chaparral, which is basically going to again be a tree that can basically, or vegetation I should say, that can live in an area that doesn't have as much water, but it can kind of go ahead and conserve the water when it needs to. This is a part of the climate that's chilly on the west coast, and we just had chilly right up there. Interestingly enough about this is that if you want to look and you want to compare it to something, it's actually very comparable to California. And so what we see then is that we see that it can be very, very nice, or it can be very, very cool. Sometimes it could be extremely warm, just depending on kind of the type of the year. Now, the next thing that we look at is marine west coast climate. If you look at just the actual name, marine west coast, this is cool rainy winters and mild. We also see rainy summers with forest vegetation. This is going to occur in southern Chile and Argentina, and this is going to be very similar to a place like Oregon and Washington. If you've ever been to Oregon or Washington, there's usually three things that are probably happening. It's either probably foggy, it's either raining, or it's probably nice. And that's usually what you see with Oregon and Washington, and that's very typical of marine west coast. The next one that we see, and this is going to be the last one here, is going to be a highland climate. A highland climate varies from moderate to cold due to elevation, wind, sun, and landscape. What we see here is if we look at the maps, you're going to go ahead and you're going to see some of South America, but Mexico is a good example of this. If we kind of zoom in a little bit, you're going to go ahead and you're going to see some climate that's going to be really, really, really warm because it's so dry, but you also see some of these areas that are going to be higher up in elevation, which basically causes it to be colder. So for example, a place like Chile, Argentina, Bolivia right here's another good example. These are areas that you would think would be a little bit warmer, but in actuality they're cool because of the highland climate. This has been Chapter 9, Section 2. Make sure that you complete your assessment for this section, and that's it.